are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
We are doing this in our open democracies, discussing this all open and loud, and I'm not for that.
What is European Union? What is freedom? How we learn together.
The obvious question is, what is the EU doing? What is our plan?
Welcome back, everyone. I am still Mathieu Paulet. I'm still a technology reporter at Politico. And we've just had this morning a broader debate about digital sovereignty. But this panel, this very panel, brings that question down to one of these most practical battlegrounds, cloud. If Europe wants to be sovereign in AI, data, cybersecurity, and you name it, it needs cloud services it can trust, afford, and actually use. But Europe's cloud market is still complicated, adoption is uneven, switching providers can be hard, users worry about lock-in costs and security. Meanwhile, policymakers worry about dependence on a small number of very large non-European providers. Now, the Commission is preparing a Cloud and AI Development Act. One of the big questions is whether it can actually reduce Europe's dependence on foreign technology, or whether Europe still needs to remain deeply connected, open to global providers. To unpack everything, I'm very happy to have with me on stage Domitille Legrand, so project directors for cloud, HPC, data centers, quantum computing, that's a lot, from the French Ministry of Economy and Finance, Frank Karliczek, the CEO and founder of Nextcloud, a German cloud provider, and Ilias Chantos, head of global privacy and government affairs for Europe at Broadcom. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to start maybe to take a step back and to, when we talk about the future of European cloud, are we talking about a market that is ready to grow, or a market that is still fragmented, too dependent, very hard to navigate maybe for users, business users? Domitille.
So actually, we have to say that European companies in digital sector are less than 250 employees. So they are mainly like middle companies that are really innovative, but they struggle into scaling up in front of huge giant players. Mm-hmm. And this calls for a strong answer from the European Commission to help the companies to grow, consolidate, and compete globally. So Europe cannot stay a continent with a lot of innovation, but without industrial global champions.
Frank, so as the European provider, what's the biggest barrier you see in the cloud market in Europe today? Is it about visibility for you, procurement, lock-in?
Yeah, for a long time it was the technical limitations that European sovereign open source solutions were not on par with American products, but this is over for many years. I would say the main blocker here is user acceptance. We really have a lot of people in Europe are just skeptical, not because it doesn't work, but because it might look a little bit different. Some people are confused if a button is left instead of right and so on in the user interface. And an example I always make is like the color coding. And we know that Microsoft Word is blue, Excel is green, and PowerPoint is orange, right? At Nextcloud, we didn't have these colors, because who cares about the colors, right? But now I learned that it's like really, really important for a lot of people to see their colors that they're familiar with. So in the latest version, we also put a word editor in blue and the spreadsheet in green. And as an engineer, it's of course ridiculous, right? Who cares about the colors? This is user acceptance. This is people need to like, yeah, I know it, I understand it, I can use it. So this is really underestimated, and yeah, the acceptance is the main blocker at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yes, what do you think from where you're setting in the market about the European cloud market?
So we don't operate the cloud, right? We are a company that provides foundational technology for our European partners to build and run their sovereign cloud solution. Companies like OVH, companies like Ionos, companies like Advania, so Arvato, Cubione, Voila, a long, large ecosystem. So from my perspective, the biggest challenge, if you like, for European market is scale. The ability for those organizations, the ability for European cloud providers to scale and grow and to be able to compete with hyperscalers. So, and clearly an aspect of scale is acceptance. An aspect of scale is investment. An aspect of scale is expertise and capabilities to be able to grow and offer additional innovative solutions. So it's about how you make sure that you have the local investment, how you make sure that you grow the market, and how you make sure that these companies can expand and grow internationally.
Dimitri, so what is the hardest part of cloud adoption for public administration, which are also business users, right? Is it about buying cloud? Is it about trusting cloud? Is it about switching cloud?
I think the three of what you mentioned, but being able to trust one cloud is something that we've seen a lot in France. And actually, the regulation has been put in 2019 for a cloud of trust. So it's called Secnum Cloud, and it enables the protection of the most sensitive data to be protected against cybersecurity risk among those extraterritorial laws. So that's really important for us, and it's also enabling the adoption of cloud in the administration, being able to say, don't worry, some cloud providers are stamped by ANSI, our security agency. And they are like stamped to say they can protect your most sensitive data against extraterritorial laws. And actually, the adoption of cloud raised a lot since this implementation. Was it a big concern at the time? Because we see now it's sort of on everyone's mind, but was it already a big concern when it was designed? Yeah, it was a big concern because people prefer to keep their data stored in their building, being able to manage the cloud and stuff. So this is a problem of change, a cultural change. And it has proved really effectiveness. Last year, for instance, the cloud market for the public cloud market was about 84 million euros, and most of this procurement was oriented to European cloud providers. So this is really effective, and I think the best thing is to say it's cloud of trust, so you can go without any thought. Yeah. Frank, if we now turn to the Cloud and AI Development Act, which is still expected on May 27th, but let's see about this. So what do you expect from it to maybe help you make a case for European government, for European users, whether they're governments or business? What do you expect? Do you expect it to set sovereignty criteria, to steer maybe more public procurement money to European alternatives?
Well, there's a difference between what I expect and what I want. So,
okay.
To say it first.
So let's have some wishful thinking then.
Yeah, I think it's, from a big picture perspective, it's pretty clear what we need. I mean, we have this strong dependency on US vendors, which can be used for blackmailing the European economy, governments, everything. And this also happens, right? I mean, if you look at the negotiations around tariffs and like what happens with NATO and happens with Iran, the whole technology dependency is mixed into the negotiations, which makes everything, difficult for Europe and painful because we have this dependency. So the obvious thing we need to do as Europe to like solve this dependency, to make sure that there's no dependency anymore or only a soft dependency, basically. So what's needed is clear rules that there should be a preference for European open source solutions. And in some key areas like critical infrastructure, it should be mandatory. And this is not crazy. Like everybody else, the US, Russia, China, I don't want to compare us with these countries, but everybody's doing it except us. For all of them, it's pretty clear that it's about national security, which is critical infrastructure. Then there cannot be like a kill switch which can be operated from the other side of the planet. That's pretty clear. Only we are not doing it in Europe. And I think we should be more protective about ourselves here. But what I expect is actually something similar in writing, then with a nice little exception at the end, which is then like usually, except if there's no good European open source solution we can find, then it's also okay to buy from the US. And this is then the backdoor where everything goes on as it goes today. This is what I expect, unfortunately.
Ilias, so do you think we need, or how do you feel about having this European preference? How do you feel about a regulation mandating which public sectors maybe should exclusively rely on sovereign cloud
First and foremost, I think when one has a challenge, a problem, let's just make sure that we all agree on what the problem is.
So what's the problem?
So, the fact that there is a lot of sovereignty washing, the fact that you talk about sovereignty and nobody knows what one really means, okay? So, in that sense, and I will refer to the previous panel, the work that has been done with Digit and their scalable definition of sovereignty with multiple criteria included on what constitutes sovereignty. Jurisdictional sovereignty, you spoke about it a moment ago, operational sovereignty, supply chain sovereignty, technological sovereignty, sovereignty around the security implementation that you deploy is going to be absolutely key that we get it right, against which then there can be benchmarking and measurement on what is sovereign solution versus what is not sovereign solution. And from my perspective, if CAIDA is anchoring its approach on the Digit sovereignty framework, which we've seen it working in practice, we're in the right direction. The topic that I would diverge, if you like, from Frank is the question of open source versus proprietary software. Why? Because from where I sit, it's a question of capabilities, it's a question of functionality, it's a question of different controls. It's not a question about how the software is licensed. And in the end, we can even debate whether there are different dependencies when one has to do with open source. There's clearly a role for open source, right? I mean, we participate and contribute to open source as well. It's just that it's not about open source only.
I'd like to get to open source, but first maybe we mentioned Digit Cloud Sovereignty Framework, and I want to also hear the other panelists on it. So Dominique, did you get a chance to have a look? Did the Commission get the right formula for sovereignty?
Maybe on that, I would like to clarify, like the French position that's maybe not well understood. Sometimes France really advocates a balanced approach for digital sovereignty. That means we are far from any protectionism. We are just saying that our aim is to support Europe's still emerging digital ecosystem. And we don't want to exclude any of the foreign investors, provided that they contribute to the European ecosystem. And that's why we believe that sovereignty and sovereignty package with the CADA and so on, a cloud sovereignty framework, should introduce European preference in the digital sector, and foreign investors could benefit from this European preference if they contribute sufficiently in value to our ecosystem. And there are two different things. First, what I've just said about the European preference in the public procurement, which is really giving the conditions for the companies to grow. And one other part, which is cybersecurity, that has been mentioned by the other panelists. So on these cybersecurity topics, it's true that we go a bit further, meaning that for some of the sensitive data, we want to go further in this European preference, applying maybe some jurisdictional criteria and saying for this specific sensitive data, we want to be protected against extraterritorial laws and so on.
Can you maybe just elaborate on which sectors and which critical data you have in mind? Because that's something we hear a lot. Do you have a short list of sectors you think should exclusively rely on EU-only offers?
So I'm only speaking about like obligation for the public sector. Right. In France, we have that for the administration. And sensitive data are data that if a third country access to the data, it can incur a risk, high risk for public order, for health of people and so on. So it's really described in the law. And we worked with the different administrations to determine what is a sensitive data and what is not, in order to really define the perimeter that is, for this perimeter, it's compelling to resort to a cloud of trust. And for the rest, they can go on the market as everybody. And in this cloud of trust, I want to add, Thomas Courbe has said that this morning, but some hybrid solutions exist between foreign players and European players. And this hybrid solution can be a cloud of trust. So again, it's not a matter of excluding foreign investment. It's a matter of thinking things properly in order to take into account the different risks, the geopolitical context, and so on.
I think in that case, and in the cloud sovereignty framework proposed by Digit, semantics also do matter. And I want to hear you, Frank, on actually, because so the cloud sovereignty framework ended up awarding some cloud tender to also Sens, which is a joint venture between Thales and Google. So effectively, the Commission is branding Google technology as sovereign. Do you see it? How do you feel about this? Are you feeling comfortable with this, Frank?
Yeah, I have strong feelings about that, but I
sure
want to
do.
respond what was said earlier because it was not completely correct. So it was said that open source is not really important because open source is all about licenses. Who cares about licenses? It's all about control. This is a bit of a misunderstanding or twisting of words because open source is actually not about licenses. Open source is actually about control. So if something is open source, it means you can look inside, you can check if there's a backdoor in there or not. It means you can also operate it independently from the software vendor. You can build on top of it, and you can really deploy it wherever you want, and you actually don't have the dependency to the vendor. Just as an example, I mean, Broadcom bought VMware lately and increased the prices like crazy, which makes a lot of people unhappy. And if it would have been open source, this would not have been a problem, because you can then also run it like by someone else independently from Broadcom. This is exactly the kind of control and freedom that everybody needs, and especially we in Europe here needs. And the lack of open source is exactly the problem here. But maybe now to your question.
Please.
Yeah, this is the whole topic about sovereignty washing. This is really a bit of the problem here. We also see this in other places. There's also the Schwarz Group, the Stack It in Germany, who also has this partnership with Google and say, oh, now it's digital sovereign because we have a nightly backup of the Google services on the European servers. That is not a sovereign solution. I mean, sovereignty means that someone on the other side of the planet cannot switch off our infrastructure. That's sovereignty. But if, like the Trump administration tells Google, switch off the infrastructure, then it's switched off. There's absolutely nothing Thales or Schwarz or anyone else in Europe can do. So it's clearly not sovereign.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of that? So can US tech be deemed sovereign, Ilias?
So, as I said, we are not operating the cloud, right? We provide the bricks that allows people to build the cloud that they want, to build the house that they want.
But some people say you are either
run.
sovereign or you're not, and if there is like those bricks, I mean, if you are somewhere in the value chain, then by design you can't be sovereign.
On the contrary, because when you look at this, first of all, actually, we take the partnership approach that actually, people like the French administration is advocating. But I would argue very strongly that, of course, we are sovereign. Why? Number one, actually, the ones who are sovereign are the sovereign cloud providers, the providers who are European, the providers who are utilizing also our technology, but then they're building capabilities on top. But then they control how they want to operate and how they want to run their infrastructure. If you don't accept that, well, frankly, then is OVH not sovereign? Is IONOS not sovereign? What about all those certifications they got from agencies like ANSI or BSI? So I can't see, I cannot see how we can go down that direction. From my perspective, the key requirement is partnership and the creation of the local industrial ecosystem, the ability to agree on a definition and then execute against that definition so as to be able to grow and enable the European partners to scale. Because without that, we're not getting anywhere. I don't think my point about open source was understood. I didn't say the open source is not important. Commercial disputes and stuff, I will not comment. Because it's a bit unfair to say that people are upset. What we see is our customers are actually coming and asking for more sovereign solutions. Otherwise, we wouldn't, the whole effort for sovereignty is pushing the market to that direction. And also, frankly, our technology.
So it sounds like you're all dying to talk about like open source for a little. So maybe let's do that properly now. So why do you think it is or it is not a part of the toolbox towards digital sovereignty?
But it is. This is a key point. Open source is a solution also as part of the overall ecosystem. As I said, we build technology. We use open source. We enable open source deployment on our platform. We make sure that we're building and encouraging the utilization of open source or of open source technologies and open source components also on our platform. But in the end, open source also has dependencies. Dependencies from where the code is coming, how that technology is supported, and what is the cost of that support. So it's not like I want to be free, therefore I'm open source and problem solved. So
it's not a solution in and of itself,
but it has a role, of course.
Yeah.
Not to mention scale. Sorry.
Do you want to react to that,
Yes,
Frank?
yes, please.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
The details are really important here. The details are important. I mean, everybody loves open source, contributes to open source, enables open source, great. But the question is if something is really so completely open source that you can run it independently from a software vendor or from different continent or not. So at the moment, the Trump administration, just as an example, can tell Broadcom, stop doing business in Europe. And then you will stop doing business in Europe. And then we have a problem. If it's open source, that's not possible, because you can run it without the vendor. This is the difference.
Maybe on open,
Please, yeah.
on open source, I think
because the context is also, sorry to interrupt, the context is also that within this tech sovereignty package at the end of this month, there will also be an open source strategy by the European Commission. So that's also like very topical to discuss as part of this debate. Sorry, go on.
I think open source is really a lever of sovereignty. This is something that we advocate also in France, because it's transparent, it avoids vendor locking, backdoors. So I think we are aligned with Nextcloud on the main advantages of open source. Of course, we have to go further into, let's say, building the conditions that are appropriate for the open source to develop. We would expect the Commission to maybe to give some ways to be able to assess the healthiness of a project, of an open source project, the auditability also, to leverage on the open source initiatives like the European EDIC, and to support all the initiatives around commons, because if the community is large enough, then there's no problem of maintenance on the different solutions. And of course, if it's transparent and if we have access to the source code, it's again easier to assess the cybersecurity of these solutions, and it's easier also to get the control over the value chain. So of course we are pro open source solutions, and I think it's really a good way to promote sovereignty, and of course we welcome this from the Commission in the sovereignty package.
Dominique, I want to stay with you for a moment, because so France and Germany are actively right now, as we speak, trying to actually come up with a joint, I don't know, you tell me, is it a proposal, is it a position, is it criteria, you tell me, but what we put behind digital sovereignty, because that's something we've seen in the past, wasn't always so easy. Now we can discuss whether we need a definition. We've done that plenty this morning earlier. But so this is what the France and Germany are now trying to do. Can you give us a little update on where this is at?
Yes, so the Digital Sovereignty Task Force comes from the Digital Summit that was held in Berlin in 2025 in November. And the outcomes were positive in terms of alignment for sovereignty, and we are right now discussing with German and French people. And so how it must be seen is this is a task force that aims to provide an analysis, proposals in support of a coherent and ambitious approach for European digital sovereignty. So for now, we have not launched any non-paper, because otherwise you would have seen it. But I think on both sides, we really want to publicly communicate the outcomes of our works, and at least before the communication of the Commission on the digital package and the CADA especially.
So you're hoping to present something before the package? The
CADA, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see if the CADA will be published with the digital package.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see about this. No, I'm going to press you a little on this. So what is it going to look like? Is it going to be like a set of criteria that France and Germany have agreed on? Is it going to be a list of, we were discussing about sectors and what is sensitive data? Is it going to be also like a joint definition? Okay, what we mean by sensitive sector, sensitive data?
So all of these are, of course, subject to discussions. So we discuss what's sensitive data, we discuss criteria. I think what I can say is that on French side, we are really trying to see what are the right criteria. So I can mention, like, is it the amount of R&D that you get on the European territory? Is it the percentage of skilled employment that you locate in Europe? So all of these criteria are discussed. And on French side, we will soon launch a consultation to the private sector in order to really see what's the appropriate threshold for these criteria. So this is something that we want also like openly to discuss with the ecosystem. So that's what I can say.
So you have been working on this for several months now. What are the hurdles? Where are the disagreements?
I think we cannot say we have a disagreement because we are really aligned since the November 2025 on the fact that we want to discuss these sovereignty topics. And as you've seen, so this also opens a lot of different doors. So we need to open all of these doors and see where we can find things to converge and where we are, where we might disagree.
My understanding is that the French are more favorable to use public procurement as a lever and to push for more buy European policies. Is that correct?
So what I can say is on French side, we advocate European preference in public procurement. That's true. For German side, I will let them say. So, but maybe you will see that on the communication that we will do.
Okay, fair enough. Frank, public procurement as a tool, is it a good tool also, or is it something that's going to have very limited impact?
No, I think it's a really good tool. So something that is not so widely discussed, it's related, but it's not really about digital sovereignty. It's also about the economic policy, basically. I mean, the Draghi report says that we should build like European champions here. And I think public procurement is a great tool for that. What a lot of people like don't know or forget is like the hyperscalers in the US, the big ones, they also got big with public procurement money. Like these big companies from Google, from AWS, Microsoft, they all got like, in the early days, tons of public money, and this is how they basically were able to scale up. And I think this is something we can do and also should do in the same way in Europe. And from someone who has started a company, is running a company, I can say that if there would be legislation that says like, hey, in this sector, we will buy this amount of European open source software in the next X years. This would be a huge catalyst for the startup sector, for the software sector in Germany and in Europe, because if people know that there's a market, there's a €1 billion market here opening up, and the public sector will buy this kind of products in the next few years, and this is like super attractive to build products in this space or found companies around it. So I think public procurement can be a huge catalyst here. I'm a big fan of that.
Yes, do we need to give a little kick to European companies with public procurement in Europe?
Public procurement surely has a role to play. I mean, there's no discussion about that. Of course, for public procurement to work properly, again, we can't have sovereignty washing. We need a clear definition. And for the market as well to scale, right? So we need to make sure that we have access to different public procurements around Europe for eventually the numbers to get big enough for the industrial ecosystem to be invested even further, and that's certainly what we're trying to do, as well as for the champions to emerge, if you want to call it that way, or the existing champions.
How do we make that happen?
Well, certainly there is a role, as I said, in CAIDA, in terms of anchoring the definition and then the requirements around how that definition looks like into the legislation and what are the capabilities that need to be in place. So the example that Frank mentioned, kill switch. Right? So the requirement that there is no kill switch. When I'm looking at the position that we're taking in this discussion, we make sure that the sovereign cloud providers that we support and rely on our technology are self-reliant. To his point about our inability to, let's say, do business, but that's the whole design. By design, we don't have access to the workloads, we don't have access to the data. We make sure that the providers there can run themselves. That's exactly the point about local investment, partnership, and growth of the ecosystem. They need the bigger market, though, to grow, and that's where the definition comes into play.
Dimitri, so do we also, like something we discussed earlier this morning is also like, so public procurement is just one tool, but indeed we have maybe to also focus on more simplification, on scale, on harmonizing. Is it also like important tool in that toolbox towards digital sovereignty?
Yes, for sure. This is something we are clearly working on. But I think, of course, the point which is at stake in this sovereignty package is really the European preference in the public procurement. And I think it should reflect the European Union ambition to be not a mere user of this technology, but really to position itself as a strong actor, really able to pave the way for the next technological developments, to be a standard setter, to be like a leader in this market. But of course, this comes also with simplification, and I think this is also the purpose of like omnibus or any kind of other legislation. But we are expecting that also in therefore, we are expecting in the CADA, for instance, criteria that are simple, that can be measurable, and that are also coming from discussions with the ecosystem.
Frank, so you mentioned, or you hinted at earlier, the tech kill switch scenario. Are we over-applying the tech kill switch lens on that debate, or is it also a question of competitiveness in Europe? Is it both? Is it about like security, whatever we're discussing about the need to achieve digital sovereignty? Is it about both security and competitiveness?
Yeah, lots of different factors. It's security, it's competitiveness, it's like industry espionage. There are so many factors there, and they all play together. I think at the end it's a mixture of different factors. They're all equally important. I think kill switch is maybe the one that is the most abstract. A lot of people cannot imagine that. Like, how should this happen to me? That's crazy. And people forget that it actually already happens. With the ICC is the public example here, but there are also other organizations where, like, yeah, they just do something that I don't know, the US doesn't like. Maybe you do too much climate change research, or you do too much gender studies, or you do, I don't know, you're not helping with Iran, or you're doing tariffs on China or whatever, then this can happen. And I'm not saying then this will be something will switched off for all of Europe. I mean, this will be too drastic maybe, but individual organizations, and we already see this in negotiations that are happening. As I said earlier, it's mixed together with geopolitical questions. So, I mean, the thing I'm always saying is, like, when I started to do IT, like in the 90s, it was not political. It was just, I don't know, done by some nerds in the basement. It was like, it comes out of the wall, like electricity or water, who cares, right? It's just commodity. And nowadays, it's geopolitical. Like, IT is used as a power tool to enforce your own interests on others. And very similar to control to oil or to rare earth materials and other things. So really need to be strategic here.
Right, you wanted to comment on this?
Yeah, I want to come back on this idea because we are talking about sovereignty here in a sense of cybersecurity. So again, for me, there is two different things: European preference and cybersecurity. And that's why we are expecting also the European Commission to articulate very closely the CADA and the Cybersecurity Act. So these two for us are really going together. As in the CSA, the objective is to cover different cybersecurity risks, among which risks that have been mentioned, such as the industrial espionage. So,
so should we have a list of high-risk vendors in the CADA as well?
So, No, but what I want to say is that the CSA is giving the framework. So let's say we want to protect from what? And on our side, we say we must protect from extraterritorial laws, for example, for some sensitive data. And the CADA should be supported by the CSA because we want to be able to get a framework in which we can use in order to do the public procurement for some specific data that require some specific cybersecurity requirements. So this is how we see both really articulated. And if I want to zoom on one risk that we've mentioned, the extraterritorial law, it's a reality that the intellectual property can be stolen. Just a country having extraterritorial laws and a company from this country, then the country can say to the company, you are hosting data from European players. And I suspect the C-levels of this precise company to be subject to corruption. Give me their data, all of their data. And the cloud company or any kind of company that is under this country which has extraterritorial laws don't have the choice but to give the data and don't have the choice but not to tell the client. So that's why I really want to say this is a really high risk. And that's why we want that to be included also in the Cybersecurity Act, because it can enable these problematics to be taken into account in a really strong framework and stamped by an agency and any kind of trustworthy partner.
Yes, you have strong thoughts on this.
Let me try to bring the two things together, if you like. In the end, whether we're talking about cybersecurity, whether we're talking about sovereignty, it's about risk management, right? It's about, the one is the cybersecurity risk, the other one is the geopolitical risk, the ability to act autonomously. So in the end, what it is that we're looking for, whether in CAIDA, whether in the definition of sovereignty, whether on how we actually make decisions on what data needs to be sovereign and deployed in a sovereign environment versus data that we're more comfortable from a risk point of view that they're in a non-sovereign environment or in a quasi-sovereign environment. It's all about risk management. It's all about ascertaining what is the risk and then making a decision more or less when it comes to the infrastructure, which again, going back to the discussion that we've been having on CAIDA, on the DIGIT framework, the scalable, flexible framework is really what we need, on the understanding that it's not possible from day zero to day one, let's say, to go off and do everything on our own. Okay? In the end, there will, and especially in the current interconnected IT world, there will always be some kind of a dependence. I mean, you spoke previously, or someone of the panelists spoke previously about, for example, semiconductors and rare earth, and we know from where 95% of the rare earth comes from. So there will always be some kind of dependency. It's how we manage that dependency and build codependencies as well.
To close our conversation, because we're coming near the end, can I ask you, so what policymakers should do first if they want to reduce dependencies on clouds while, and it's a challenge, not making cloud harder, more expensive, or less useful for the people who actually, or the people of the industries that actually need it? Domiti.
So I will take the, let's say, the administrative point of view, saying that we should build the conditions for these offers to be able to compete, to grow globally, and we also can help them through public procurement that we are really expecting from the European Commission in the sovereignty package.
Okay, Frank.
Yeah, I saw two surveys lately. One said that 60% of all European citizens like to be more independent from the US tech, and the second one said 80% wants to be more independent from the US tech. I don't know where the truth is, somewhere in the middle, but way more than 50% actually want to be more independent from US technology. So I sometimes don't really understand why politicians are so afraid of actually doing that, because I think they can make a lot of point with their voters to really stand up for European interests.
Yes.
Well, all the stats, all the numbers show what I said from the beginning, right? That we see a growing demand in our customers, in our environment, in the market for sovereignty. So as far as I'm concerned, the key requirement to create a sovereign cloud market or grow the sovereign cloud market for Europe is number one, and what it really means to avoid bullshit. Number two, arrive at a practical implementable definition that can then easily be put into procurement and help the market with partnerships, with technologies grow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up for now, but let's just reconvene when the tech sovereignty package is here so we can maybe discuss more openly. In the meantime, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.